All right. Welcome in. It is our 2009 Reclassified podcast. Peyton Gallagher, Gabe Swartz here. Last week we did the 08 class. We had a little bit of some wonky stuff. Paul George behind Tyler Zeller. Heard some feedback. Maybe that was good. Maybe that was not good. Depends on your perspective. Depends on your value of college
I feel like
basketball.
that says more about your opinion on that matter, says more about you than it does about us. Maybe it says something about us. I'm not sure.
I think it's a slight balance of both. But we are back to do the 09 Reclassified podcast. We'll have scholarships and sanctions. We'll touch on a little bit of the news going on in college sports world, Women's College World Series, college baseball, NCAA tournament. Go from there. But
before we start, sports electric the last couple of weekends. Like
just a really oddly packed Sunday yesterday.
Yeah, because normally this time of the year, I mean, it's more so July. Usually it's kind of dog days, but because the NBA playoffs have been moved back, we've got that going on. We had a game 7 yesterday. We had game 1 where Trae Young was awesome against the Sixers. You had Women's College World Series chaos, and then the rain delay. And we'll talk more about that later on in scholarships and sanctions after we re-rank this 09 class. You had USA soccer winning the CONCACAF League of Nations, but more importantly, beating Mexico in a crazy match in extra time. And then, of course, you had a prize fight that was disgusting, boxing, but something that people cared about and watched. Like, it was nonstop from 10 a.m. Pacific time to like 11 p.m. Pacific time. And it was all different kinds of sports, just zigging and zagging around, finding illegal streams and television networks to watch.
Yeah, so it was a packed Sunday. Good to see that college sports is still on the horizon and doing well. And I think, honestly, based on my Twitter feed, based on what I've been watching the most, I've been most intrigued by the Women's College World Series at this point, by this last weekend. So we'll get to that a little bit more. But
we're like 12. We're also like 12 Saturdays away from college football.
Countdown is on.
Amazing.
All right, so let's talk about the 09 Reclassified podcast. I think that the one thing that the two of us have kind of come to the conclusion on is, as we continue to get closer to now, maybe the 07 pod, the 08 pod, even a little bit this podcast, we're going to have more of a bias towards guys that are still doing relevant things in basketball at this moment, because we don't necessarily remember the guys who had huge impacts on college sports but didn't pan out in the pros, because we were significantly younger. But as we continue to get closer and closer to now, we're getting into the point where I can specifically remember random Tuesday nights in February with some of these guys. You can do the same, and I think that honestly makes it harder to rank. And the consensus we've come to on this class is that after the top 4 in our re-rank, it's going to get really dicey and get into kind of what flavor of ice cream do you like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is about formulating criteria and trying to find guys who fit that criteria more than anything else. And yeah, it was frustrating. I got down to 4 and had absolutely no idea what to do and just stared at a blank piece of paper for a good 15 to 20 minutes. And then I just started writing down names. So maybe I thought with my heart and not my head as much on this one, but there was no way to logically find something that was consistent against the entire back 2/3 of this.
I got to 6 and then I just gave up, went to bed, and was like, I'll revisit this in the morning, because I had a bunch of names down and I couldn't figure out where to go from there. So let's get to that. As we did on the last podcast, I will read the original rankings. We'll go over the All-Americans who won national championships during their time there. And then we will re-rank. I'll start at first because Peyton had the number 1 pick and took Draymond Green in 2008's class. And we had some disagreement over that, but here we go. The 09 original rankings via the 247 Sports Composite rankings. Number 1, we had Georgia Tech signing Derek Favors. Number 2 and number 3, Kentucky got John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. At 4, Avery Bradley went to Texas. At 5, John Henson to North Carolina. Xavier Henry to Kansas at 6. Jordan Hamilton at 7 to Texas, Renardo Sidney to Mississippi State at 8. We have the famous or infamous ear blower Lance Stevenson at 9, who went to Cincinnati. And then 10 through 16, we've got Keith Gallen to Oklahoma, Muftau Yaru to Villanova, Kenny Boynton to Florida, Abdul Gady at Washington, Michael Snare to Florida State, Dante Taylor to Pittsburgh, and Ryan Kelly to Duke. Kelly is a guy who I definitely, on the revisit, realized he wasn't as good as I necessarily thought he was. You pointed out to me part of that was injuries. So
yeah, I mean, he's 2-time All ACC and probably would have been 3-time had he not missed. Like, I think he broke his hand and missed like the first half of that Duke season his senior year.
And I think I was more so just surprised by, and I'll point this out as we get to the who won national championships, how little both he and Mason Plumlee played in the 2010 season.
And like, listen, I'll give a little bit of a spoiler here, but if Ryan Kelly had played at a school like Cal, based on my criteria, which I established last pod, I'll establish it here again, on the fans that watched you play, how many of them can't tell their basketball story without mentioning you? Like, how important are you to the people who watched you? If Ryan Kelly played at a school like Cal, he makes my list, but he didn't make my list because he played at Duke.
Yeah, like, honestly, playing at a better school sometimes hurts people, because it's like, how much of an impact did, I don't know, for like Derek Williams is a number 2 overall pick in this class. Probably, I would assume, is going to make our list at some point. But went to Arizona. Arizona's got plenty of NBA guys.
Right.
So who knows?
Right.
All right, let's get to college basketball All-Americans in this class. So in 2010, DeMarcus Cousins was a first-team All-American. John Wall was a first-team All-American. In 2011, Kawhi Leonard, Derek Williams, and Jordan Hamilton were all second-team All-Americans. In 2012, Thomas Robinson was a first-team All-American. Isaiah Cannon, shout out, was a second-team All-American.
John Morant and campaign before John Morant and campaign, Isaiah Cannon.
Yeah, exactly.
Murray State has produced more elite guards than your favorite school, unless your favorite school is like Kentucky. An elite program. Yeah, Kentucky or UCLA or Indiana, etc.
Sneaky thrown in there, Indiana as an elite program.
I mean, they have IT and like Yogi Ferrell and some good guards, Victor Oladipo. So,
all right, 2013, Kelly Olynyk, sneaky first-team All-American guy there. Mason Plumlee as a second-teamer from Duke. And then in 2014, a guy who got redshirted his first year. We'll surely talk about him later, and talk about him because he got redshirted because of Lance Stevenson. Sean Kilpatrick, second-team All-American in 2014 with Cincinnati. So we're there. National champions in this class. 2010 Duke. You got Dawkins, Mason Plumlee, who averaged 3.7 points per game on this national championship team, and Ryan Kelly, who averaged 1.2 points per game on this national champion team. So I found it very interesting. 2 guys, consensus top 30 rankings in their class. Plumlee averages 14 minutes per game. Kelly averages 6.5 minutes per game. It was truly a different sport, and even a different sport, different title team than the one that Coach K put together in 2015.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, this is kind of the transition point. This is where Cal gets the super turbo freshman class that, you know, rivals the Fab Five in some regards, not necessarily in the caliber of players long-term, but if you're talking about guys like Bledsoe, Wall, Boogie, all guys that I'm sure we both ranked in our lists. Yeah. I mean, it's his first year at Kentucky, and that kind of seems to be the real turning point towards the one and done era.
Yeah. And just in terms of, look at who they won the title with in that year. It was Singler, it was Shire, just a different group of players than.
Dude, I mean, now 2 guys from that team are now head coaches in college basketball because of Dawkins and Shire.
Yeah, it's and there's a guy way down on the list who didn't necessarily do anything special in terms of playing, but is also, I believe, the youngest head coach in college basketball. So I'll touch on that one later, just as a shout out, honorable mention. 2011 UConn team. They only had 2 sophomores at the time. Alex Oriaki, who was the 20th ranked player in the class, leading rebounder, played the second most minutes behind Kemba. He ended up transferring to Missouri. I forgot about that. And then Jamal Combs McDaniel, who was the 45th ranked player in this class, didn't really played 2 games, started 2 games, played in 31 of them, but didn't do too much, was on this team. 2012 Kentucky, no one in the 09 class was still there for that Kentucky championship in 2012, aside from a walk-on, Twainy Beckham. And then 2013 Louisville has Peyton Siva and Stephen Van Treese. 2014 UConn, I checked just to see if they had anyone who redshirted. They did. Layson Cromath, who was a 5th-year guy who transferred from George Washington, literally could not have remembered that he played. I don't think he got any minutes in the national championship game. So there you go. But he went George Washington to UConn. He got a ring.
One note before we start on Kentucky, because they'll be prevalently discussed. This is Cal's first year at Kentucky, which I didn't realize. I felt like he had been there for a couple more years, but he took over for Gillespie after 2 years of like total failure by Kentucky standards. And in his first 3 years at the helm, Gabe, do you want to guess his overall record? Because he had 2 of like the most dominant recent memory Kentucky teams in that span.
So 2010 was the Wall Cousins Bledsoe team, which we're going to talk about in this one. 2011 was the Brandon Knight, Enes Kanter, even though Enes Kanter didn't actually play, which we're going to have to discuss about if we're going to rank him or not in next year's class. 2012 was the Davis team. The Davis team would have won 38 games. This team would have won 30-ish, and the other team went to the Final Four. So Elite 8, Final Four, national championship. I'm going to say that they went a combined 102-10.
You somehow got the win number correct. It is 102. They just lost 14 games, which that is ridiculous over a 3-year span.
And I swear I did not have notes on that. I just remembered I just was going with it. So,
I mean, the fact of the matter is that when Coach Cal came in at Kentucky, it was off to the races from day one. He had a team that lost 5 games and a team that lost 2 games in his first 3 years at Kentucky. And again, this is kind of a turning point in the sport. And you'll see a lot of guys from this class. This is kind of a turning point in basketball, as well as it became more and more important to shoot the ball, be able to move and defend on the perimeter for forwards, because the Thomas Robinson style 4 started to evaporate out of the game at this point. Just to put a bow on the thing about Cal there, 14 losses in his first 3 years. They lost 16 games this season.
It's honestly amazing how well, okay, first of all,
the sport's caught up.
Well,
everybody's doing the one and done thing now.
Yeah, so there's that. There's also like there are some, I guess, parallels in the sense of like I know Eric Bledsoe ends up being the 68th ranked player in this class and then ends up going one and done, but there's kind of a Zion, RJ, Cam Reddish type feel to this team in that like they were kind of a world beating team and then they lose inexplicably, it seems, to West Virginia in that Elite 8 game. And I rewatched the highlights of that one. Still doesn't really make much sense to me. Other than that Bledsoe and Wall kind of had inconsistent jump shots. And at some point that was going to come back to bite them. But the fact that they went Elite 8, Final Four, national championship, and then they were back in the Final Four in 2014 and they were back in the Final Four in 2015. And since then, it's kind of fallen off, like points to exactly what you said, is that other people are using the same playbook that he's been using.
Yeah.
And it's gotten harder for him to do what he does.
Yep.
All right. You ready to rank?
I'm ready to rank. Let's go.
All right, so we're going 1 through 16. We were doing 1 through 15, and then we felt like we needed a spot for Seth Curry on last week's list. So we're going 1 through 16 now, and it gives both of us 8 picks. So
Yep.
there we go. There is a pretty clear number one in my mind.
I agree.
Only played 2 years of college, averaged 14 points per game, 10 rebounds per game. His NBA averages are probably not fair considering the amount of minutes and what he was asked to do at his first stop in San Antonio, because he's averaging 19 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game for his career. He was the 57th ranked player in his class. For San Diego State, I'm taking Kawhi Leonard as our number 1 re-ranked player.
Yeah, no doubt. To me, a guy that very easily could have maybe even won a national championship at San Diego State.
They were
had they not run into Kemba Walker. And I think that overshadows his college career a little bit, but Boardman gets paid at number 1. I don't have any complaint with this. He's been the best NBA player. He's the best player in his college program's history by far. And yeah, it should be Kawhi Leonard. Absolutely should.
He was a consensus second team All-American. I pointed that out. I was trying to remember why he didn't win Conference Player of the Year. And then I was like, okay, duh, Jimmer Fredette existed in the Mountain West.
In hindsight, he probably should have won National Player of the Year, though, over Jimmer.
I mean, in hindsight, but like
the two-way dominance is something that we've not seen at his level in the college game. He was scoring 22 points a game and probably keeping you from scoring 10 to 15.
But I mean, he was a 25% 3-point shooter, and his jump shot, like in rewatching the highlights, he was slinging that thing. It was behind the shoulder. It was whippy. And it looked good when it went in, but you can see the Spurs really, in terms of player development, like very impressive stuff to get him where he's at. I don't need to read all of his NBA accolades, but 2-time NBA champ, 2-time finals MVP, mentioned it. He's a two-time defensive player of the year. You know it. He's the number 1 guy. At number 2, I feel like there's a very obvious answer, but if you don't take him, I'm going to be kind of disappointed.
I deliberated. I thought about CJ McCollum, and I hope that you go with him at 3 because I did end up going with John Wall. After re-looking at his college accolades, and we got to remember, John Wall, prior to injury at Washington, with the Wizards, I mean, couple bad bounces against the Celtics, probably should have done more, to be completely honest. And it was pretty sad to see Brad Beal really summit into the player he's become after John Wall had these injuries and wasn't going to be able to be a part of that core with him. Because, yeah, they could be a team that could have contended for the East year in, year out had Wall just stayed healthy, but he didn't. As a college player, though, he's part of an elite company in the SEC. He is the 3rd freshman ever. Now it's happened 5 times. The last 3 guys have been Kentucky guys to win SEC Player of the Year. Prior to him, it was Bernard King in the 70s and then Chris Jackson in the 80s there, where LSU oddly had a run where they had 4 straight winners of SEC Player of the Year between Chris Jackson going back-to-back and then Shaq going back-to-back, which I just thought was kind of interesting. But he did something that was very uncommon in the league. And he had a freaking song named after him. He made the Dougie popular. Not a lot of college players have started a dance craze. I guess Justin Jefferson deserves some credit for the gritty. He's an icon. He is the flag holder for the modern era and turnover of college basketball into this decade. And yeah, he has to be. He averaged 16.6 points per game at Kentucky his lone year, 6.5 assists, 4.3 rebounds, 1.8 steals. And if they just beat West Virginia and do what they're supposed to and probably win that national championship, we have a completely different perception of him.
I mean, certainly I think that they were a disappointment in the sense that team probably was Final Four bust. I wonder, I guess the pushback on this would be that the last couple national players of the year have been Luka Garza, Obi Toppin, not necessarily one and done guys, but like in hindsight, John Wall versus Evan Turner, 2010 National Player of the Year debate, probably could have gone to Wall if you really wanted it to be, although Evan Turner was special at Ohio State. Yeah, and I do feel like just the torn Achilles in the NBA and him now playing on a horrible Rockets team has probably hurt him in the minds of people.
The bad contract, it's unfair, but yeah, it hurts his perception too.
Because he got the Supermax. Because he was
like
an all NBA guy.
Well, he's not worth the money he's making, so instantly he becomes a worthless basketball player, and that's not quite true. It's the same thing with like Westbrook. I feel like that's faded a little bit as of late, but a guy just being a bad asset does not make them a bad basketball player, and I think that's hurt the perception on him too.
Yeah. All right. Are you good on John Wall?
Yes, we're good on John Wall. John Wall saved Kentucky basketball. That's a massive overstatement, but I'm going to stick with it.
The one thing I wish I had was greater perspective of how he ended up at Kentucky. I'm very confused on how Calipari. I'm actually not very confused because I know it had something to do with Dinero. But how Calipari went Derrick Rose, Tyreek Evans, John Wall, and then convinced us all that Derrick Rose and Tyreek Evans like went to Kentucky for him. So that's kind of been the way that things have gone in that respect. At 3, I think this is harder than you think it is.
No, I understand the difficulty of it. By my criteria, it's simple, but it doesn't have to be your criteria.
I think part of the this is probably unfair to him, but the trouble in which DeMarcus Cousins has always had with teammates, coaches, referees. He's gotten hurt a couple times as well in the NBA. I don't know necessarily, especially because he went to Kentucky, and if that factors into things, him not necessarily being probably even the best, or you could make the case not the second best big man of the decade at that school.
Okay,
because of that.
You can make the argument he's not even the third best. I mean, he would be the third best behind Cat and Anthony Davis.
I think him versus Bam is a debate.
Probably not at Kentucky, but NBA-wise, maybe at some point. Bam would have to continue to grow, which he struggled this year. But anyway, we're in the weeds on this. Continue.
Okay. The crux of my debate is that I think you would lean CJ McCollum. I'm also going to go with CJ McCollum in large part because the Kentucky team, if they had gone to the Final Four, Marcus Cousins being a first-team All-American, I think that you put him at 3. I think you're going to put him at 4, which I think is fair. I'm going to put CJ McCollum at 3 because 15 over the 2, Lehigh over Duke. He was a 2-time Patriot League Player of the Year, averaged more than 20 points per game. I understand that his NBA career hasn't really been as impressive as maybe we think it is. He is a really good player and has had some very nice moments in the playoffs. I said this multiple times. I don't know if any player elevates their individual game, like LeBron James excluded, Kawhi Leonard excluded, the elite guys. I don't know if anybody goes from like 60 to 100 better than CJ in the playoffs. Like it always feels like he steps up and makes extremely difficult shots in the postseason, except for when he steps out of bounds in Denver. Yeah, I was going to say, except for this year. Yeah, I'll put him at 3 and bonus points for beating Coach K in a mega upset. Yeah. I mean, that's why we're talking about importance to the story of basketball in this modern era. CJ beat Duke. And aside from all the acclaim, that is something, an accomplishment that Boogie just unfortunately, quite frankly, doesn't have. Boogie has either been a number 2 guy when he was at Kentucky, or in the NBA, the dominance hasn't amounted to much of anything. And it's unfortunate because I thought he was starting to really figure it out next to Anthony Davis in New Orleans, and then he got hurt. And that's been his career. And I wonder what they could have accomplished in New Orleans, them too, because that was starting to look like pretty unstoppable front court, but it didn't happen. So I think, yeah,
I don't have the number for certain, but I have to think when you consider his lowest scoring output per game in his college career was 19.1 points per game as a true freshman at Lehigh, probably has the most career points of anybody from this class at the college level, has the Duke moment, and then has had a really good NBA career in which he's not been an all-star, but he's been a really good player and will continue to be for a very long time. And there's still a second chapter for CJ. If CJ gets traded this offseason and becomes like a number 3 somewhere, he could very easily be a guy who wins a couple NBA championships.
CJ was the 452nd ranked player.
Wow.
DeMarcus Cousins was the 3rd. So different expectations. I'm currently spending a little bit of, I want to see this. If I can find it, how many career points Sean Kilpatrick scored, because I think he would be the closest guy.
And maybe there's somebody at like the mid-major level. I know Oakland, I can't remember the name of the player, had a guard that scored 1 billion points, and I'm pretty sure he came from this class. But yeah, I think that it should be CJ. I think his high is higher. Although I think DeMarcus Cousins' prolonged peak was probably of a higher level of basketball at the NBA level.
That's certainly fair. So CJ scored 2,361 points, and Sean Kilpatrick scored over 2,400. So Kilpatrick outscores him by a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Part of that's just because CJ got hurt his senior year and only played 12 games. All right. Are you going DeMarcus at 4?
Yeah, it's DeMarcus Cousins at 4. There is no doubt. This was the easiest part of the list, was ranking these 4 guys in whatever order you wanted to. And they've been the best NBA players, probably. I mean, you could maybe throw Chris Middleton in there. He's kind of come on late, whereas Boogie peaked early. But Boogie is a 4-time NBA All-Star. Not the best King ever, but probably top 5 all time for the Kings, I'd say. 2-time All-NBA. And was a total monster when he was at Kentucky. I think he's got to be 4. You don't really, the lore of the John Wall team doesn't really exist without DeMarcus, but he's kind of faded historically over time, I think. And I think that's fair to say. His importance and your willingness to go, oh my God, that Kentucky team had Bledsoe, Wall, and Cousins. That's become less of like a striking fact and will probably have less resonance to like our kids than it does to us when they go back and look at the Basketball Reference and look at the rosters of these teams.
Well, and it had Patrick Patterson. It had Darius Miller, who played in the league. It had DeAndre Liggins, who played in the league. Like, the more you look at it, and like look at the margins of victory in their first 3 tournament games. I mean, I understand it was a 16 seed, a 9 seed, and a 12 because Cornell got there. But they won by 29, they won by 30, and they won by 17. Like, they were killing teams. And they were a pretty decent defensive team in that year. 35-3 overall. Like,
by the way, most Cal teams are better on defense than offense. Like, historically,
because and that's what we're seeing when they struggle this past year is like, he's not necessarily the greatest offensive coach all time. And sometimes he just kind of rolls the ball out there. And if guys aren't elite, it doesn't always work out super well. So that's something to consider. Still, I think one of the things it's very ancillary thing to talk about, but the final NCAA basketball video game with Blake Griffin on the cover, the NCAA 10 team or 10 game, you had Kentucky point guard number 11, you had Kentucky shooting guard number 24, you had center number 15, and you had John Wall, you had DeMarcus Cousins, you had Eric Bledsoe, you had power forward number 54, you had Patrick Patterson, and they were a ton of fun to play with.
So OP.
And not fair at all. Not fair at all.
No.
So
totally overpowered.
At number 5,
I'm fascinated to see where you go here.
I think it's a debate between Chris Middleton
and
Eric Bledsoe.
Okay, I had Middleton 5. I had Bledsoe later though on the list, so I won't reveal that. I had Middleton on this spot though.
Okay, I had Middleton at 5 as well. So I will put Chris Middleton at 5. He is the 103rd ranked player in this class. What it ultimately comes down to me, is a lot of these guys give you conference player of the years. They give you all freshmen. They give you 10 plus points per game scoring averages for their career. I guess like Kelly Olynyk and Thomas Robinson actually didn't because they weren't very good as freshmen and sophomore. Middleton gives you 10 plus points per game for his college career. He was a second round pick in the NBA draft. He was kind of an afterthought traded to the Bucks, and he's become their second guy. I guess you could say Drew Holiday. But he's averaged 17 points per game, and he's a two-time All-Star. And it's not like he was a slouch in college. He was an all Big 12 selection. He kind of had his work cut out for him in the fact that Texas A&M just never really was able to compete in the Big 12, and they've really rarely competed in the SEC as well. But I think that combination of NBA and college career, Chris Middleton is there, and what he means to the program in terms of pro guys. It's basically DeAndre Jordan, Chris Middleton, and Alex Caruso. Am I forgetting anyone? I guess Robert Williams.
Yeah, I don't think so. Obviously, DeAndre Jordan, but
yeah, I said DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah. And it's weird because they both played together kind of in that. I think they overlapped for a year at A&M. May have just missed each other, and it took Alex Caruso to deliver this team to anything. I think his name was Tyler Davis, the big on the Caruso team, so it was pretty good. Yeah,
Jordan did not overlap.
No, they just didn't really. They just didn't really do much anything with Middleton. They moved to the SEC. Since then, they've had some better fortunes, but like you'd hope with Buzz that they can get back, but the first 2 years have not been promising.
Yeah, I mean, who's the wing that played for the Rockets that I'm forgetting?
Daniel House.
Daniel House as well. So like a bunch of role players, and then DeAndre Jordan, who's been an all NBA guy before, and Chris Middleton, who's been an all-star. And
yeah, listen, dude.
And honestly could get a boost of like the Bucks beat the Nets. They go to the NBA Finals this year. Like that would boost his status even more. I think that
a guy, he's a friend of ours that I'm not going to name because I don't want to put him on blast, was telling me how like unready for the moment Middleton was and that he sucks in the playoffs. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Chris Middleton has made he's been just as clutch as Dame in the postseason. We just don't remember the shots because they're not ending series. But the dude has had in his playoff career in the last 4 years, right, has had 4 shots that have either forced overtime or won a game in the playoffs. He is clutch as all get out. He's a guy that's probably just going to miss all NBA teams throughout his career, but was a throwaway in a trade that probably saved this team because they don't attract free agents and they've not drafted very well to surround Giannis with great talent. So if they don't get Chris Middleton as just like kind of a throw-in piece in a deal, I don't know where they're at right now. They're certainly not this. Middleton, I think, has had a profound impact on the modern, not like to the point of like a LeBron James. I don't want to overstep here, but has had a massively profound impact on the modern complexion of NBA basketball, I think, in a way that's probably not really appreciated because he plays next to Giannis.
Yeah, and I still just, to me, when you're debating Bledsoe versus Middleton, like they've played on the same pro team, and they both, like, you can see who was the more valuable one. Eric Bledsoe was in Phoenix, and he was kind of a problem. I don't want to be here. The infamous tweet, all that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah,
we can make the jokes and all that, but like Chris Middleton to me is 5. I'm intrigued to hear, because you said not Bledsoe at 6. Who is your 6th guy?
Okay, this is Tyler Zeller season. Pretty much the exact same guy. Mason Plumlee is who I took here.
Okay. Do you want to know where I had Mason Plumlee ranked?
Yeah, go for it. Tell me.
I had him at 10.
Okay.
But I would love to hear the argument, and I don't think I'm going to be that anti it.
He's an NCAA champion, although he was not a very big component of that Duke team. He did play. more than Tyler Zeller played on the team that I gave him credit for winning with UNC. He played 14 minutes a game. He was an important role player. He got all of his brothers to Duke. That's a big deal. He's been a solid NBA player throughout his career and will probably play for another 4 or 5 years. He'll have a double-digit NBA year career, right? He was pretty good for Detroit this past year.
He needs to play. He was
drafted in 13-14.
Yeah,
he needs to play
he needs
3 more years.
3 more years to be a 10-year NBA guy.
I love when this has nothing to do with, I should probably get back to the argument here, but I do love whenever he just is like, I am Point Plumlee now. I'm taking the ball coast to coast. I'm going to try some crazy Euro step and I'm just going to throw the layup off the backboard. That's my favorite thing in the world. It's like the Jokic rubbed off on him. It's like, I gotta do this now.
I've never heard anyone refer to him as this, but his basketball reference page says that his nickname is Plum Dog Millionaire. So
that's the only reason he's 6. That right there.
Okay.
His final year at Duke, he was a consensus All-American. He averaged 17 and 10. Again, with Bledsoe, especially with the playoff failures and the fact that he was a 3rd, maybe 4th guy at Kentucky that has never, I think won 6th man of the year one time with the Clippers. Maybe. No, he didn't even do that. Has just he's going to be an ancillary guy that people don't really talk about 10 years after he retires. Duke fans will remember Mason Plumlee, I think, with a fonder respect than Kentucky fans look back on Bledsoe, because how many Bledsoes had there been at this point at Kentucky? There have been a lot of Mason Plumlees at Duke, but Duke fans are weird and will uphold him in a higher esteem, especially because he stayed for 4 years. So for me, I think Plumlee, when you think of Duke in the modern era, Plumlee is over the last 10 years, one of the first guys that you think of and falls into that Redick role of that's the white guy on that team that you hate. And Plumlee was that for a while. So I went with Plumlee here.
Yeah, I think he could have been boosted even more if they had not lost to Lehigh in 2012.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't remember what their tournament situation was in 2013.
Didn't they lose to Mercer? Or was that 14?
That would have been 14 because that was the Jabari Parker team.
I'm going to look at the game logs and get back to you.
Okay. So you can.
They lost to Louisville in.
Oh, they lost to Louisville. They got drubbed in the Elite Eight game, the Kevin Ware game.
And in that game, Plumlee had 17 on very nice 6 for 9 shooting.
Sweet. So, okay.
Plumlee 17 and 12 for him.
I'm not going to push back on that, but I will put Bledsoe at 7 for us. And here's my argument. By the way, Mason Plumlee was the 27th ranked player in the class.
Best Plumlee,
but he also got the other Plumlees to Duke. So, if you want to talk about things that they bring along, cachet-wise.
I think the first Plumlee actually was not Mason, but I think he got Miles there.
I feel like
we'll get our team on this.
Okay. All right. Either way, at 7, I'm going with Eric Bledsoe. He did average in 1 year 11 points per game. He was all freshman in the 2010 season for SEC. He was all SEC tourney, so he was playing good basketball at the end of the year. He's averaged 14 points per game for his NBA career. He's been a 2-time all-defensive guy. He was all rookie. And I think that ultimately comes down to this. I understand that there's been tons of great guards at Kentucky, and you can go down the list: Jamal Murray, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Tyler Ulis to some extent, John Wall, all these guys. Eric Bledsoe is one of the, I would say, 6 most impactful success stories that Calipari can point to in terms of elevating talent, because he was the 68th ranked player and he turned him into a one and done, which to me is a very impressive thing. And I think if you are, I guess I guess this is unique to Kentucky in that I'm giving a compliment to John Calipari, and I would say I don't think a lot of coaches could do what he did with Bledsoe. So maybe some people would say that's a knock on him and he would be lesser. I would say it comes down to this. If your interpretation of this list is I get the player and I get the career that they gave, yes, maybe Bledsoe's career is not as impressive. If I get the player where they were originally ranked and they still do what they did in college, Bledsoe going from 68th ranked player to one and done is a huge accomplishment for almost any program. And I think it just gets overlooked because it was Kentucky.
Yeah, I think he also gets kind of overlooked because of what he has been in the NBA, which is a really good player that evaporates in the playoffs,
which
like
kills
no
him.
other
It
guy
kills
in
his
the league.
reputation.
Yeah, and that should, I mean, yeah, he deserves clout. He was a really good college basketball player. He's been a really good pro. There's not much above average to him. And I think he's going to be, unfortunately, and I don't want to just shade Eric Bledsoe, probably a guy who's fairly forgettable long-term in his NBA career,
Probably.
his college career. And that's why he's chilling out at 7 and not higher on this list, right?
But if we want to talk about guys who are going to be forgettable long-term, there's going to be a lot of those at the bottom of this list or middle to bottom of this list. And it was kind of a put the names in the hat and pull one out.
Yeah, Bledsoe doesn't exist. He exists in the purgatory between the elite guys and I remember that guys, where it's like, yeah, he's pretty good.
He's somewhere, but like in terms of Kentucky guards, he's somewhere between like a Jamal Murray and a Isaiah.
Oh, he's
Briscoe.
way lower than Jamal Murray.
No, he's somewhere between Jamal Murray and Isaiah Briscoe.
I was about to say he exists in like the Tyler Ulis, Isaiah Briscoe range, and probably more towards Briscoe because Ulis was great in college.
I won't stand for that. He's significantly better than Isaiah Briscoe was.
Sure. But he's well below like Malik Monk and Jamal Murray and De'Aaron Fox and Devin Booker, and Tyler Ulis, Rondo, which was pre-Cal.
Way pre-Cal.
Right. But somehow
I love that
Cal is also somehow brainwashed us all and convinced us that Rondo played for Cal as well.
He coached Rondo.
Yeah. But he's way down there. He's like 8 or 9.
All right. Who you got at 8?
At 8, I went with Kelly Olynyk.
Okay. I had him at 7, so I'm good with that.
Was an All-American, the 2012-13 West Coast Conference Player of the Year. Final year at Gonzaga, averaged 17.8 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, 1.1 blocks on really solid shooting. 30% from 3 was kind of shocking to me because I thought of him as like a better 3-point shooter in college than I guess he was. Also, though, shot 66% from 2, which for a guy at 7 feet in the West Coast Conference is a little bit less impressive, but still 66%. That's really good. A guy that kind of blew up his last year at Gonzaga, kind of out of nowhere, but was part of a Gonzaga team that was undefeated pretty much until they weren't. I don't remember the pretense of this game. I don't know why it was played in the middle of the year, but that Gonzaga Butler game is like one of my all-time favorite games of just elite mid-major programs saying, all right, let's get together in the middle of the year and play a huge game at Hinkle Fieldhouse. And that was a game
Roosevelt Jones game, right?
What's up?
It's the Roosevelt Jones like floater for the win game.
Yeah, yes. A buzzer beater. I think the final was 64-63 Butler. They stormed the floor. It was a whiteout. Kind of introduced me to the magic of Hinkle as opposed to just like Butler as a program. Of course, Butler would then go on to the next year, I think, get to the national championship game, right? Or was it this year? Because it was the year post Hayward. They went to back-to-back national championships. So this
Butler Gonzaga was in 2013, and they went to the national championship in 2011, 2010, 2011, which points out, like to your point, it Butler was always like, oh, they were the underdog team. In my mind, they were always the underdog team that got to the national championship a couple times. I didn't realize that like until 2013 that Butler played at a historic venue, and then you realized it in this situation.
Game day was there. It was incredible. And I mean, even though it's a negative memory for Olynyk, makes him memorable to college basketball fans because he was kind of the heel in that game. Yeah, I had Olynyk here. I thought that it was somewhat of a no-brainer. And by the way, yeah, he's had a really solid NBA career too. So,
yeah. All right. I forgot how bad he was as a freshman and a sophomore.
I mean, comparatively, yes.
Like how non-impactful he was. I also forgot how non-impactful as a freshman and a sophomore that Thomas Robinson was, but I'm going to put him at 9 because he was the best player on a national championship runner-up team. Averaged 17 and 12 that year. He was first team All-American. No one was beating Anthony Davis for the player of the year title in 2012, but if anyone was going to, it would have been either him or Draymond Green. And 2012 Big 12 player of the year. And what I will point out, if you want to talk about people who mean something to programs, underratedly, Thomas Robinson, the block to send the Missouri game to overtime, and the fact that this Kansas team went to a Final Four when Missouri, who was also a 2 seed in the same year, and Duke, who was also a 2 seed in the same year. If you want to talk about programs that Kansas fans do not like, the fact that both of those 2 seeds lost to 15s and this one went to the national championship, and I would say overachieved given talent, I think he means more to the program than people remember. And for that, I think once you get into the fact that like his NBA career stinks, he was the 5th pick in the draft, went to the Kings, and they traded him pretty quickly to the Rockets, and it was just bouncing around from there. I don't think in 10 to 15 to 20 years, we really care much for the difference in NBA career between Thomas Robinson and Derek Favors. And Thomas Robinson, in my mind, was a more impactful and more memorable college player than Derek Favors, even though Derek Favors was the number 1 overall recruit and he didn't have a bad year at Georgia Tech.
I mean, I thought about not ranking Derek Favors altogether. It's just kind of a highly forgettable player. Didn't really do much at Georgia Tech. It's not like he's in that Chris Bosh realm. I actually am a little bit surprised here that you went with Thomas Robinson over the guy that I'm going to go next, but I probably shouldn't be because the Kansas thing, his sentimentality probably just means a little bit more to you. And you might perceive that as me saying that is a slight, which I'm not. I'm saying you watched him more closely and understand it a little bit better than I do.
And he went to a Final Four. He has like
total NBA bust, and just played in the wrong era.
Yeah, like the game you point out, the game past his talent was suited to dominate college, and he did.
Yeah, and it's weird to me that like a guy like Derek Favors stuck around and he didn't because they have similar games.
Yeah.
Some guys just flame out though. I have Avery Bradley here at 10 as we enter the double digits. The guy that ESPN ranked first, went to Texas, didn't really do much anything at Texas. It's kind of incredible at this point in time. He's played for now 7 NBA teams after first part of his career is in Boston, made a couple all defensive teams, was a guy who averaged 16 a game. And I mean, his fall off has been fascinating. He averaged 16 a game again with Memphis in 2019, which feels odd. It just kind of popped up out of nowhere after a couple years under 10 points per game, but it's probably going to go down in this class, top 6 or 7 guys in NBA points scored, I'd say, and has more NBA accolades than anybody who's going to be named after him, and was good at Texas. He wasn't great. They didn't really do much anything. He's overshadowed by the LaMarcus Aldridges and the Kevin Durant's, of course. But he's just another good guard that would be a part of the all-time all-Texas team. And, yeah, I have him here. This is kind of the line of demarcation between guys who were just really good basketball players at the NBA and college level, and then guys that are like cult heroes for me.
You think that Avery Bradley makes the all-time Texas team?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if he does. Of
It's
NBA
like
players,
DJ
maybe.
Augustine, Avery Bradley, KD,
TJ
LaMarcus
Ford.
Aldridge, insert center.
TJ
Whether
Ford.
it's
It was better than Avery Bradley.
sure at the college level, but Avery Bradley is a better basketball player than Ford.
I mean, TJ Ford wasn't a.
When Bleacher Report posts these graphics, Avery Bradley is on it.
I think you're underrating how average TJ Ford's NBA career was.
I'm telling you, when Bleacher Report posts this or Sports Center posts these graphics, with all of them standing on the floor together with Kevin Durant in the front and then everybody fanning out behind, Avery Bradley is on the graphic.
Okay. I think that his season at Texas was pretty underwhelming. He was
he was the number 1 overall recruit and he went outside the lottery.
And he was all freshman team, but he was the second best player on a team that lost in the first round to an 8 seed, a 9 seed, Wake Forest. If they had won, they would have played Kentucky, ironically, in that tournament. And crazily enough, you can't act like this wasn't a talented Texas team. Honestly, you want to draw some comparisons. Avery Bradley, in terms of like not really panning out into much, kind of gives off some like Rick Barnes having a team that was preseason odds, championship plus 1,200 odds. So they were clearly one of the better. They were clearly one of the better teams in the country, and still like
Rick Barnes does not do well with freshmen. We know this.
Yeah, it gives off some mega vibes of what Tennessee had this year. I'm not going to argue too much on that. My guy at number, what are we at, 11?
We are at 11.
At 11, I'm going to go with Derek Favors.
Wow. Okay. I can't say I agree with this, but all right.
All freshman team, ACC Rookie of the Year, pretty decent NBA career. He was the number 1 overall recruit, and I just really don't feel like Georgia Tech is like underwhelmed by him. I just think that they. So I think
I don't think they like carry the flag for him though.
That's fair. I think he
anything
could have been
else
better suited by going to like I think that how short and succinct I was on Derek Favors is me admitting like he was okay for a number 1 overall recruit according to 247 Sports. He wasn't anything special, but he deserves to be on this list. And I think in comparison to the next couple guys that are going to go, I think it's just
I think this is the point in the sands where I draw the line and I'm like, okay, Derek Favors doesn't have the NBA accolades to put him over like the folk heroes that I'm going to have following him. He did not make my 16.
Okay.
I think his relevance to basketball has kind of been, well, okay. I mean, his top 5 pick, another guy probably just kind of in the wrong era. Another guy who's kind of just been overshadowed by his front court mates, whether it was Millsap or Gobert, or I mean, even as recently as last year. He was really good for New Orleans last year, but like even as recently as last year, like Zion. Yeah, he's just there.
I think him and Avery Bradley are like essentially the same guy.
Except Avery Bradley made multiple all defensive teams and averaged like 16 points per game for the Celtics at one point in time.
And Derek Favors was the Big 12 or the ACC Freshman of the Year. So
that's okay. I disagree with that, but we'll keep it moving. I think that's wrong. I think that's dead wrong. But your criteria is different than my criteria. There's nothing outstanding about Derek Favors. No shots at Derek Favors.
I don't think there's anything outstanding.
But all the smoke with Derek Favors.
I think college Derek Favors, there were a few things that were outstanding that if he had stuck around and played in a different era and played more than 1 year, he would have been even better.
But he didn't, though.
But he didn't. Think about this.
Like the most defining thing about Derek Favors' career is like the whole debate of should we or shouldn't we play him with Rudy Gobert a couple years ago.
And that's what I'm saying. Derek Favors was good in college, and then you're devaluing him based on the NBA. Avery Bradley was good in the NBA, and I'm devaluing based on what he was in college. So it's even.
I just don't feel like Georgia Tech fans really care about Derek Favors that much, but
I don't personally have a very good pulse on Georgia Tech fans. So
we should talk to the Hornets fans around the world, the God Tech folk.
You're closer to Atlanta than I am.
No, I'm actually not. I'm in Phoenix, Gabe. You're in Kansas City.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. So at 12 here, I'm going to go ahead and go with Sean Kilpatrick, who is an All-American. As you said, he was the leading scorer from this team. Unfortunate bounces in the NCAA tournament, but just all in all, probably the guy that is third all-time at Cincinnati behind Oscar Robertson and Kenyon Martin, I would say, right? Right?
I think so.
And just got bad luck in the NCAA tournament. I believe he was part of the team that beat Texas in overtime with a buzzer beater that was ruled off because it was a dunk, and the guy, instead of laying it in, dunked it, and it didn't leave his hands in time because of that fact. And they lost to Texas, and that's, I'm pretty sure, how Sean Kilpatrick's college career ended. I could be wrong about that. But, yeah, he's one of the best players. I think more than like Derek Favors is Cincinnati people stand Sean Kilpatrick, right? I think he's more important historically to a group of fans than Favors is by a significant margin.
I can remember him in 2013 wearing those like horrifically bad Adidas March Madness jerseys, the t-shirt jerseys that were like neon.
Oh, yeah.
And Cincinnati had the red ones. I remember him wearing those.
Michigan had the yellow.
Yeah. Baylor
had like the weird camouflage print.
Louisville
Louisville won a title wearing those.
Yeah. Like,
and played Michigan, who also wore those.
In terms of ridiculous jerseys that have won championships, 2013 Louisville wearing those, and 2016 the Cavs wearing like t-shirt jerseys to beat the Warriors, all time wacky.
People are going to go back and watch the video and be like, what happened here? Why is this happening?
Kilpatrick's career ended against Harvard in the NCAA tournament.
A guy who he got bad breaks in the tournament, and you can say that's partially on him. You'd probably be right. I just think, yeah, he is more memorable and important to Cincinnati fans than anything that Derek Favors ever did.
He had one game during his All-American season that he didn't score 10 points, and it was 9 points against a pretty decent Pitt team.
Yeah.
Just looking at his game log. I am not going to object to that. I like Kilpatrick at 12. I had him ranked at 14. At 13, I'm going to put Alec Burks, who was good in 2 seasons at Colorado. I think underratedly good. You pointed out to me, as we discussed this earlier, and I've been doing a really poor job of saying where guys were ranked before.
Again,
I made it pretty clear. Derek Favors was first. Thomas Robinson was 28th. Kelly Olynyk was unranked. Kilpatrick is 341st. Alec Burks 194th. 194th, and you get a guy who in 2 seasons averaged 19 points per game in college, becomes a lottery pick. He was Big 12 Freshman of the Year in 2010. Kind of resurfaced this year with the Knicks and was important somewhat on a playoff team.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. We're at 13.
I just remember him being like one of the Jazz guards on the Millsap, Derek Favors, and like him and some other guys on that Jazz team.
Nothing special, but like I think if he had played on a more successful NBA team earlier in his career,
yeah,
he could have been a really good like championship role player. But
absolutely. But yeah, at this point in his career, I think he's done a lot for his reputation this year, honestly, with the Knicks kind of resurging his career and being an important part for them. I don't hate it.
I'm probably
I got guys that I would have preferred, but I think this is just a difference in our criteria showing.
I think I'm vastly undervaluing a guy who just dominated college, though.
I wonder which one. I'm gonna go with my favorite ever.
I know where
college
you're going.
Basketball player here.
I know where you're going.
A hero to me. This was what Steph Curry was to children around the world, was what this guy was for me.
Is it the 24th ranked player in this class?
It very well might be. John Jenkins of Vanderbilt was lethal from behind the arc. Just a pure jump shooter. I remember there was a whole segment where game day was, I think, at Vanderbilt, Kentucky from Memorial. And they talked about how John Jenkins' shot release was like less than a second. And I'm like, this guy is a superhero. He was from Gallatin, Tennessee, which has actually produced a lot of talent, football or otherwise. Final 2 years at Vandy, just under 20 points per game, was a 3-year guy. Part of that Festus Ezeli team, was a 6th man of the year in the SEC, and helped Vandy win their first SEC title in like 70 years when they beat Kentucky, the Anthony Davis team. SEC tourney MVP, 2-time All-SEC. Kind of surprised he wasn't an All-American at one point in his career. This dude shot 43.8% for his college career from three. 43.8% on a volume of, let me look here, 7.1 attempts per game. Like, was a shooter. It just never really happened for him in the NBA. He got injured, was a first-round pick by Atlanta. It's sad. It makes me sad that he wasn't a great NBA player, but was just unreal in college. And it was my favorite college basketball player ever. So I had to get him in.
I'm not going to fault you on that. And sometimes personal biases are going to come in.
And by the way, there are guys like Will Purdue. There are guys, sure, like Shan Foster. He makes a claim for being the best player in his program's history. He does.
I'm going to let you be the expert on Vanderbilt basketball. And so if you say that,
it's probably Will Purdue. It probably is Will Purdue. But my best player in Vanderbilt history is John Jenkins. So,
okay. In the Peyton T. Gallagher personal record books, John Jenkins sits on the podium. All right. At 15 for us, I honestly think this guy goes significantly higher if he doesn't play at a certain program. I think he goes significantly higher if, just like Kawhi Leonard, if he doesn't get eliminated by Kemba Walker in the NCAA tournament. He is the 2010 Pac-10 Rookie of the Year. He's the 2011 Pac-10 Player of the Year. He was a 2-time All Pac-12 player, number 2 pick in the draft in 2011. 94th ranked player according to 247 Sports Composite, a guy that just dominated college. And if I'm going to value dominating college the way that I do, which I do, I have to put him there. Derek Williams at 15 for us.
Wow. Okay.
He was dominant. Yeah. And my
super freak athlete, dunking on everybody.
He goes top 10. Like, personally, if he makes a Final Four, he is equal with Thomas Robinson in my book.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But he didn't do that. And he ran into Kemba. And then he became a not very good NBA player too. So there you go. Do you think that our personal biases may have kept him lower? Or do you think that truly the team success of Arizona, and I think also just the program being good enough that there's plenty of NBA guys there, they probably don't value him in the same light?
I think he exists in the pantheon with like Derek Favors, Alec Burke. I think he exists in range of the rankings, and you could choose any permutation of guys from this grouping to be kind of in this spot, and I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the other elite shooter from this era to round out our list from the SEC. Marshall Henderson.
Wow.
Ole Miss.
Oh, my goodness.
He was college basketball's Johnny Manziel. Sticking his tongue out, running around. He won an NCAA tournament game. He might be one of the best players in Ole Miss history, honestly. He was 2012-13 All-SEC and All-SEC tournament, SEC tourney MVP. I'm pretty sure Ole Miss won that SEC tournament, which was like their first in forever. had Ole Miss relevant in basketball. I forgot he started at Utah and then transferred to Ole Miss for the next couple years of his career, kind of an up and down trajectory to get there. But averaged 20 points per game in 2012, and in 2013, 19 points per game. Was just running all over the floor. Shot 10.9 threes a game his sophomore year, and then 12.6 his junior year. He had a half-court shot that he hit against Vandy to win a game for Ole Miss. Baggy shorts. I'm kind of shocked that, and I think in this era, probably would have gotten a chance to play in the NBA. Never really got an NBA shot. He was a little undersized, 6'2", 177. But is like one of the guys that college basketball fans remember from this era, and I think has to be part of this class.
I don't want to be like an all-time jerk, but a guy that gets recruited by Utah, transfers to Texas Tech, then transfers to a junior college, and gets arrested for drug charges before going to Ole Miss, probably is not a guy that coaches really want to re-recruit. But if we want to torpedo that from our brain, I'm okay with it. It's unfortunate. I don't want to be that guy. He was an incredible player. The NBA thing, I just think he wasn't a good enough defender. But I do remember the tongue out. I do remember him chucking threes. I do remember the buzzer beater against Vanderbilt. I'm sure you do. I'm interested that you went at 16, and I can't wait to get over some of the honorable mentions guys that we've got worth talking about.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Johnny Manziel, people don't know this, started at Oregon. Took him a little while to catch on with the program because he was kind of a hothead. Yeah. People don't know this. Johnny Manziel was not always at Texas A&M. He transferred from Oregon. There's a lot of similarities here. No. He never played for Oregon, but he signed there.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No, Johnny was a verbal commitment. He never signed.
Pretty sure he signed with Oregon. I'm looking at an article right now. If he stayed with Oregon, would Johnny Manziel have beaten out Marcus Mariota?
Yeah, it's the Bleacher Report one. He was a verbal commitment.
Well, I stand corrected. We'll do some more research on this after the fact, because I think there was stuff that happened here that facilitated him not going to Oregon. But anyway, I think there's a lot of similarity between those two.
Except for one won the premier award of their sport and the other one didn't. But I can't fault you. It's 16 and we can do weird stuff at 16. Let's go over honorable mentions. Do you have anyone you'd like to talk about first? I will say the highest ranked player that we did not get to in my list was John Henson.
John Henson, Isaiah Cannon, who was part of a Murray State team that stayed undefeated for a very long time and got a game on national television on ESPN, which was unheard of for Murray State. Of course, then was followed by Campaign and, of course, John Morant. So I think it's a little bit overshadowed in the Murray State historical log. But I think, to that fan base is just about as important than any of these guys to their individual fan bases. So he got a shout out. If it were up to me, like Isaiah Cannon was 15 on my list. So if I had done this by myself, he would have made it. But you chose to go with guys like Alec Burks and Derek Favors, who I left off, and that kind of pushed him off the list. Ryan Kelly, we already talked about him, discussed him, multiple All-ACC player. Decent little run in the NBA for like a half second with the Lakers.
With one of the worst Lakers teams ever.
For sure. Absolutely. Like Jordan Clarkson and the boys just chucking it up. But him, Lance Stevenson, just missed. He was on my list, wasn't on yours. That's fine. Like you said, John Henson. So there you go.
Okay. I had Henson at 15 that we didn't get to. I had Kenny Boynton at 16. I think that there's a value in being the 12th ranked player who plays 4 straight years and averages over 10 points per game in all those seasons. Tim Frazier, I think, has a claim to be one of the best players in Penn State history. NBA guys that are here that definitely would not make this list, even though they kind of did interesting stuff in the league. Ian Clark with Belmont at 317. Matthew Dellavedova with St. Mary's at 396. Mike Muscala at 455 from Bucknell. Peyton Siva, 34th, Louisville. Never played in the NBA, but was a very important piece of a national championship team. He didn't play in the NBA.
Not a single minute. I, for whatever reason, vividly remember him playing for the I guess they were the Pelicans at the time of the Pelicans.
I stand corrected. He played 24 career games, never started, averaged 9 minutes a game.
Okay.
So I think he played less than 500 minutes if you want to talk about the Luka Garza rule. Other guys, other memories from this class, I will say, if we're just going to toss, like, if this list goes 20 deep and then like 17 through 20 is guys who mean something to a program, Christian Watford at 38, the fact that he hit the shot against Kentucky, like, certainly he has some value to his program.
I mean, him and John Jenkins were the people who felled Kentucky.
Yeah, that's some wild stuff.
I mean, to be fair, Vandy almost had second half leads against Kentucky in all three of their games. Like, Vandy was right there and I cried like a baby after they lost to Wisconsin. Like, I was so mad. You know that meme of like the kid who's just like, and they're like, you know, the kid with his clenched up fist and whatever, and was just like anger. That was me after they lost to Wisconsin. Because that Vandy team should have gone so much further.
Was that second round?
Yes, they lost in the round of 32. Freaking Kevin Stallings.
I think we were kind of unfair to Jordan Hamilton, who was a top 10 player and honestly was the better guy that went to Texas in terms of college career. He was a consensus All-American his second season. And then we've got Solomon Hill, NBA career. Elijah Johnson, who was impactful at Kansas. Royce White signed with Minnesota, went to Iowa State, and then kind of had certain NBA career derailed by his mental health issues, which stunk. Rodney Magruder at K-State. And then the last thing that I want to point out is youngest head coach in Division I basketball in this class. Drew Valentine, who went to Oakland, is now the head coach at Loyola Chicago. He was the 377th player. So, yes, Drew Valentine was ranked ahead of Matthew Dellavedova. He was ranked ahead of Mike Muscala. He was ranked ahead of CJ McCollum. Like, crazy stuff.
Crazy.
So, there's your 2009 Reclassified pod. Let's get to some news and notes.
Okay. I mean, news, this will transition us, I think, right into scholarships and sanctions, but a scholarship for Nick Saban for just being like, I'm going to coach until I die. Extension until 2008. He will be 77 years old when this extension ends. Worth $8 million a year. He is the highest paid employee of the state government in Alabama by a lot.
If he coaches this contract out, he will be 2 years older than Coach K will be at the end of this season.
It has, I think the strain of coaching football is a lot more. You don't see guys coach to this age in football nearly as often. I don't feel like as you do in basketball. I could be wrong about that. That's just kind of a suspicion.
More people. Well, it's more people to be in charge of.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
you got to recruit more guys. Yeah.
It feels like more work. Maybe it's not, but it feels like
also a bigger staff, but yes.
Yeah, that's true. I just can't imagine that he actually gets to the end of that contract, but I don't know. I don't know why they wouldn't.
He looks younger every year, it feels like.
I mean, he's younger than Herm.
Yeah.
Or
they're the same age.
They're the same age. Okay. I was going to say they're
both 69.
Nice. Anything else? You want to touch on the Women's College World Series? James Madison, I hope you're rooting for them today. 3:00.
No offense to G. Juarez, actively root against Oklahoma because G. Juarez.
Well, yeah, I would think you would root against anyone who basically said F you to the ASU program.
There's a lot more to that we're not going to get into now.
But
yeah, absolutely.
We were discussing this last night over text. The sites of the Women's College World Series and College World Series because people were trashing on them because it rains in Oklahoma. Like,
What?
there are very few places better situated to host these tournaments than Oklahoma City and Omaha.
Literally a perfect event to me. I mean, I didn't play softball. I can't speak to the athletic rigors of it. Obviously, what happened the other night maybe shouldn't have. And because of that and the backlash of that, they decided to not play the games out yesterday night. That would have been real late after the rain delay. And they're going to push the tournament by days. So the people who are saying it's unfair that this tournament gets this many days to play out and the baseball tournament gets twice as many, I would come back and say, well, in baseball, pitchers can't just go and pitch consecutive games, right? The games are shorter. And we need to stop comparing. I prefer softball to baseball. Softball is a great sport, but they're different. They are different sports. And although there are similarities, they are not the same. It's not the equivalent. Like, it's not the like for like, apples for apples comp that women's basketball and men's basketball is. And I think that that's important nuance in any argument about this. I think, yeah, absolutely. Now that I'm just sounding off on this, we should probably have auxiliary days built in just in case there are rain delays, right? But you can play a double header in softball in which the same pitcher pitches the entire game because the mechanism for throwing the ball is different. The strain is different. The ballpark is smaller. Players are covering less ground. Again, I'm not a person who's played both at any kind of high level, but I'd have to imagine the strain is a little bit less significant based on the fact that you're covering less ground literally, and the games are literally shorter in softball. Like, they're different sports, and to just come out and say it's unfair that the men get more days to play the tournament. No, it's just easier to turn around and keep playing softball. Right.
Well, it's like the equivalent of this would be if people said the college football season goes on too long in comparison to, and there's not really a women's equivalent to college football, but you can't force guys to play football more than once a week. You can't force pitchers to throw in baseball the amount of innings required by a whole pitching staff.
Yeah. And maybe
the amount of time that the Women's College World Series is played. But if you played the Women's College World Series over the amount of time that the Men's College World Series would take, every team would just pitch one girl the entire time.
Which still basically
happens. And it still almost happens.
Which is cool. I think the quick turn nature of it and the high saturation of competition is awesome and makes for like a terrific product. And that it's just like, we're just going to keep going and going. You're going to see your favorite teams multiple times in a day. Sometimes you're going to see the best players over and over again. The fact that they can do it, like, you can't tell me Montana Fouts literally went back-to-back days in which she had 16 strikeouts and then a perfect game. Like, you cannot tell me that these athletes can't handle that.
I want to see Kumar do that.
They clearly can. And like, yeah, baseball players can't do that. They literally cannot. Pitchers. The biggest complaint, I think, is with the game that I believe involved Florida State and Oklahoma State. Yeah, the elimination game that was played at a time that literally passed over, I think, 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That was because of rain delays. And then Florida State had to come back and turn around and play less than 12 hours later, which probably shouldn't happen. But also, like, these are 20-year-olds. We kind of like turn around on 6 hours of sleep fairly often. And the adrenaline carryover probably would be pretty significant. Like, this is not the equivalent of like asking somebody to run a marathon and then do it again the next day.
Some would argue that the late night hours are some of our most productive hours, depending on the individual.
Yeah.
I think the gripe most people had, as we have this grand discussion about it, is that the rule that the NCAA said was no games can start after 11 p.m. local time and they started a game at 12:45 a.m. So
yeah, probably not great.
Yeah, like not a great
Kind of an
idea.
awesome spectacle though. Like the like we're the only show in town late night thing. Kind of cool.
Any game that ends post midnight Pacific time, probably something weird happened.
And something did that. And again, probably shouldn't have been allowed to happen. And yeah, like I said, we should probably have like auxiliary days built in case games have to get pushed, and we need to be malleable. And they have TV partners, I know, but it's also the middle of the summer in the middle of the day. So ESPN is like kicking a sports center for that. And they should probably have contractual language that for a sport that's outside that gets affected by rain, like baseball and softball do, should probably have like clauses built in for this kind of thing. And I was like, okay, not to just cut you off and keep going here, but this is an important point, so I'm going to make it. I at first was like, okay, ESPN can't push NBA playoff games to put softball into that window. That's just bad business, right? Not to mention the fact that ESPN has multiple networks that they could air the game on if they had to get pushed. But like ESPN doesn't even have an NBA playoff game until Thursday because TNT has all the games this week. So yeah, there probably should be the ability to push games so that teams aren't playing on this tight of turn. Like Florida State, realistically, shouldn't have to play 3 times in 24 hours. That probably shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think because they pushed everything back, if there's a game 3 of the national championship series, it would be Thursday, which pushes it from ESPN to ESPN2 because there's going to be Bucks Nets game 3.
Yeah.
I think they really got screwed over in large part just because it was a Saturday night, Sunday issue with the schedule, and they didn't want to mess up all day Sunday programming with the NCAA baseball tournament. I don't know. It's a TV network thing. It's an NCAA tournament thing. You're just never going to make everybody happy.
This isn't it, but point being, there are a lot of arguments to be made that are important arguments about gender equality in college sports. This is not one of them. Anybody who's saying that this is unfair because of a gender gap, at least to me, and again, take this with a grain of salt because my perspective is limited to that of a white male, which is important context. But to me, based on the facts presented, anybody who's making the argument that says this is unfair on the basis of gender is making an argument that lacks a lot of nuance. And honestly, for the people who are going to be one-minded the other way, who are wrong as well, helps them to invalidate future arguments because this is a baseless one. And that's not good either.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So
anyway, that's my rant.
I think that was a pretty solid point to be made. You got anything else? You got any? I mean, that was basically your sanction was what your sanction,
yeah.
Your scholarship was what, or your sanction was what? False equivalency
the sanction,
arguments?
I think, was directly geared towards Jess Mendoza, who I think is actually really terrific. Most of the time makes really good points. Just thought that was kind of a bad one, especially from somebody who understands the nuance of baseball at a pretty high level. Yeah. Like the differences between the two as a former softball player and a former Sunday night baseball analyst, like
someone who works in the front office for the New York Mets.
Yeah, I thought that was weird that happened, that she said that.
I'm going to give a scholarship to John Calipari because he went working in the portal and then he went advocating and got what he wanted. So I'm going to just say scholarship to John Calipari's happiness because the SEC granted immediate eligibility to players who transfer within the conference, which means Severe Wheeler can play for Kentucky next year after transferring from Georgia. It also means Henry Toa can play for Alabama. Tight end Eric Gilbert can play for Georgia after transferring from LSU. So that impacts football this fall too.
Yes, it does. I mean, every conference in the country is going to approve this rule. So
they have to.
Yeah.
You got anything?
No, I think I gave a good scholarship and a good sanction.
All right. That is our show for today. Thanks for listening to the 2009 Reclassified podcast. You got a prediction? You think JMU gets it done this afternoon? It's going to be, we're recording this on Monday afternoon, and it'll be out on Tuesday. So this will either make you look really smart or really stupid.
God, I hope so, but probably no.
I'm going to say I believe in Odyssey Alexander. I'm going to say JMU gets done. And then I'm going to say Alabama wins the other game.
I think they had their shot when they hit the home run to tie it at 3 yesterday and just couldn't get it across the line. Probably out of gas. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope you're wrong too. Disappointing showing from ASU this weekend, but we're not even going to talk about that. So
pitchers matter. That's what we learned.
They do matter. Pitchers matter for sure. And experience matters as well. So you'd hope that pays off in the long run.
Scholarship Drew Swift. Excellent career. Congratulations.
Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. Very good career.
Go get drafted.
All right. Thank you for listening. We will see you guys later this week.